Hey everybody, I'm Alan with Dad's Playing Games, and this is the battle video for the 5th scenario from the Perilous Dark Expansion, where I'm taking a warband through first the Dark Alchemy and then the Perilous Dark scenarios for the first edition of Frostgrave. Be sure to check the details below, where you'll find a link to this expansion's introductory video, and you'll also find timestamps to jump to a specific spot in this video. And this video will be featuring the Warren's scenario from the Perilous Dark Expansion. But before I go over the special features for this scenario, I want to go over a rule that I've been getting wrong from the core book. When you make a move, if you come within 1 inch of an enemy figure, normally that figure can choose to snap into combat with you, and they can move 1 inch to do that. For some reason, I thought that it meant that when you move your figure, you kind of get a bonus 1 inch move beyond your normal move to further snap into combat. It probably hasn't affected things too much because I've been having both sides do this wrong. And in Perilous Dark, the monsters will always try to snap into combat. So if I've moved close to them, they would want to snap in anyway. But I just want to point this out that I have been getting it wrong. After this battle, I should be getting it right going forward. And now we'll take a look at the Warren's scenario. The enemies in this scenario include white gorillas. However, I will be using Lego monkeys from the late 80s and early 90s pirate sets, and mana worms, which will be represented with tails from Lego dragons and crocodiles from the mid-90s, along with some generic tails from more recent knockoff brands. The rules for the gorillas are found in the core book Bestiary, and in this scenario, they can draw a line of sight to any figure within 16 inches, representing being able to hear the sound of the warband crunching through snow and climbing over crumbling buildings and rubble. The mana worms have fairly weak stats, but have a hunger for magic. As such, they can always draw a line of sight to spellcasters. They will dispel any active spells on a target that loses combat to them, and whenever a spell is cast, each mana worm that is not in combat will make an immediate 3-inch move toward the spellcaster. And lastly, being a slithery worm, they can travel over rough terrain and climb without any penalties. The battle itself is played on a 30-inch by 30-inch board. Most Perilous Dark scenarios call for much less terrain than a standard Frostgrave table to aid the enemy that can't think like a human can. However, this board should be crowded with terrain much like a normal head-to-head Frostgrave game. And also, the enemies in this scenario aren't hindered as much by line-of-sight restrictions. The warband sets up within 3 inches of the center of one table edge. 2 treasure tokens are placed, one in the middle of each side edge of the table. 1 white gorilla is placed in the middle of the edge opposite the deployment edge, and 1 is placed on each side edge, halfway between the treasure token and the back edge of the table. And 2 mana worms are placed in each corner. Many of the Perilous Dark scenarios state not to roll random encounters, and that move penalties are not used when carrying treasure tokens. However, this scenario does not include that wording, so hauling off loot will trigger random monsters if you're using that optional rule, will reduce movement by half, and as always, will cause a -1 to your figure's fight stat. At the end of each turn, roll for crumbling debris to fall in one quadrant of the board. All figures, friend and foe, in the quadrant face a +0 shooting attack. Then, spawn 1 mana worm to a random corner, plus 1 additional mana worm for each successful spell you cast that turn. The battle is over when all of your figures have either left the far end of the board or have fallen. Now we'll take a look at the state of Eirvathon's warband, give a brief story recap of what they've been up to, and then we'll get right into the Warren's scenario. In Eirvathon's last battle, he passed 3 levels and upgraded his ability to cast Embed Enchantment, and finally increased his physical prowess by increasing his fight and health by +1. I sold the ground mana worm teeth I'd found in the last battle, and used my gold crowns to upgrade my longtime thug to a barbarian, my infantryman to a man-at-arms, and the recruit to an infantryman. And these soldiers continue on with Bronth the Knight wielding the Reaver's Blade he found in the last battle, Scylla the Templar carrying the Barbarian's Blade, Pierre the Treasure Hunter with the Sword +2, the Master Thief, Darrow the Ranger, Death Striker, and I've named my tracker Grayson, and he is carrying the newly embedded Bow +1. Eirvathon begins this scenario at level 20, needing 55 experience for his next level and with 80 gold crowns in his vault. Having stopped the desecration of the graves of the fallen Reavers, the warband collected a few weapons, frozen books, and other treasures, but nothing quite as grand as what they'd hoped to find, and they brought their loot back to their base. As the books thawed, they found one of them contained some journal pages. After decrypting an ancient language they were written in, Eirvathon learned the Reaver's main treasury was in a vault in the western part of the city. After resupplying, the warband made their way to the Warrens, a little explored area of the city known for both its deadly creatures and its close-packed, crumbling architecture. As the warband made their way through, their scout returned and reported seeing some strange worm or leech-like creatures. After giving a full description of them and their actions, Jadis knew these must be mana worms, and informed Eirvathon the creatures are drawn to and feed on magic, and warned him they should try to use their magic as little as possible to slip by the worms. The scout said he heard other creatures moving about the ruins as well, but wasn't able to see what they were, though the grunts they made and their movements sounded large and mean. Drawing their weapons, the warband prepares to enter the Warrens. So the battlefield is all set up. It feels kind of nice to have what looks like more of a proper Frostgrave table that's just completely littered with terrain here. Something to keep in mind is that the mana worms that are in the four corners always have line of sight to my spellcasters, so they will not be deterred by all this rubble. And they can climb over all rough terrain, which there's a lot of. Pretty much anything laying on its side is rough terrain. And for my team to get just about anywhere on this board, they're going to have to go over some of that. The white, or in this case brown gorillas that are on the board, they can see anything within 16 inches because they hear you moving in the snow and climbing over rubble. So they won't be too hindered by that. There are 2 treasure tokens on the board, and something to keep in mind that with this scenario, it does not say that they don't slow down your party. So any warband member carrying one of those will still have their move reduced by half. We'll see which dice get used. I will use the die that rolls the lowest, and the enemy will use the die that rolls the highest. Looks like I will be using the green die with a 2, and the enemy will be using the purple die with an 18. For out-of-game spells, starting with Brew Potion for Eirvathon on a 14. He got it. He will brew a Potion of Teleportation. And Jadis with a -2. Failure. Next, we'll try the Enchanted Soldier. Eirvathon on an 11. Failure. And Jadis with a -2. Failure. And now we will do Reveal Secret. We will start with Jadis this time. 16 with a -2. 14. He missed it. And Eirvathon with a 16. Hey, he got it, so he will not have to use his scroll of Reveal Secret that he has. The warband is set up. We've got Eirvathon, the Enchanter, Jadis, the Apprentice, the Thug that's been upgraded to the Barbarian, the Recruit who's now an Infantryman. We've got Bronth the Knight with the new Reaver's Blade. We've got Pierre, the Treasure Hunter, Death Striker, the Warhound, the Man-at-Arms, who was upgraded from an Infantryman. We've got Darrow, the Archer, and I guess he's a Ranger, and I gave him that teleportation potion that I brewed. We've got Grayson, the Tracker, with the Bow +1. We've got the Master Thief, the Treasure Hunter, and we've got Scylla, the Templar, and I remembered to put her helmet on to start this battle. My strategy is to again split up my warband like I did in the last battle. I'm going to have these 2 heavy hitters come over here to try to take down those mana worms to prevent them from coming up this way. so that my spellcasters and Bronth and my man-at-arms can head this way. And I'm going to have Pierre, the Master Thief, and Death Striker run that way towards that treasure. My archers, I'm not quite sure what they're going to do yet. And Skyla over here, since she has that Barbarian's Blade that lets her fight better when she's by herself, she's actually going to head over this way to try to fight off those two mana worms there. Another big part of my strategy is that I'm actually not planning to cast many spells in this entire battle, because whenever I do, these mana worms get an extra movement, and at the end of the turn I have to spawn an additional mana worm. So I'm going to try to have, I'm probably going to have Jadis just pick up a treasure, and that's why I gave these guys just regular bows and arrows so that they can shoot instead of casting spells, and we'll see how this strategy works to keep enemy numbers under control. I'll start the game with having Eirvathon activate by himself, and he will move right over here to have some line of sight through here. Next, Jadis will just on a single move run over here and pick up that treasure token with his action. Something else the rules don't say about treasure is whether or not you're supposed to roll random encounters. Most of the other scenarios say not to. Random encounters are always an optional rule, but I've decided, the last few battles I got through fairly easily, so we'll go ahead and see if a random monster appears. Under the optional rules, random monsters appear on a 16+. No random monsters with that treasure. For the monster phase, the gorillas will go first. None of my figures are within 16 inches, so they do not know that my soldiers are there. So they will all move randomly, and I'll roll off camera to see which direction they go. This gorilla over here will move, he'll climb up this at half movement because of rough terrain, and from there he can see my soldiers over there, so he will then do his second move. Downhill doesn't cause him the move penalty, so he will move down to here. This centralized gorilla will move 6 inches over here on a random move, and since he cannot see any of my soldiers from there, his turn is done. He does not make a second random move. And over to the last gorilla, he will make a random move over this into this rubble. That's his move because of rough terrain, and he cannot see any of my figures from there. The mana worms, always having line of sight and unaffected by rough terrain, can hop over this, come here. I just say they have line of sight to my spellcasters. They come right there. The two over here in this corner can see my Templars, so they will move that direction. To this back corner, I will say that the mana worms will take the path of least resistance, so they won't climb over this wall when they can just go around it. So they will go around this wall and end up right up here. And they won't stay there, so we'll just lay them down there. And the last two back here can travel through where all these soldier statues are to right about here. For my soldier phase, I'd mentioned having my treasure hunters run this way. I think it's actually going to be easier for them to run this way. We'll start with having the Master Thief. He can kind of zigzag through here, and on a double move end up over here. Pierre on a double move, having to deal with some rough terrain, can climb over that and run down here, and end up right there by the Master Thief. Next we'll have Grayson with his magical bow +1 fire at the tan colored mana worm. It's a clear shot, so he's got a +3 against +1. 5. That fails. He'll then hop down, run over this terrain, and go to right about there. I wanted my ranger to fire at those guys, but Skyla's actually in the way. So I'll have Skyla go ahead and run over here. On a 5, she can get to right about here, and then she can snap into combat while avoiding the tan-colored snake. And from there, she can attack. Unfortunately, Darrow is just within the 8 inches to give her the special abilities of her sword. It does give her still fight +1, so she's fight +5 against fight +1. She gets a 12 against 10. Mana Worms have an armor of 8 with only 6 health. Her sword deals +2 damage as a two-handed weapon, so she deals 6 damage, which is just enough to defeat that Mana Worm. 1 down. Next, Darrow will fire an arrow, +2 against +1 defense. Darrow only gets a 6 against 13. That is a miss. Darrow will then run over here and join Grayson. Death Striker will double move around here, over here by the treasure hunters, to right there, so that the gorilla can draw a line of sight to him. Next, my infantryman on a double move can go 9, which puts him right down here by this corner, close enough for that green mana worm to snap into combat. So it comes out here into combat. My infantryman can now run down there and snap into combat with the green one, which puts him close enough to the black one for the black one to snap into combat with him. Then my barbarian and Bronth will both run over here. And from there, they're both within 3 inches of Eirvathon, so they can activate with him on the next round. At the end of the round, debris is going to fall in one of the 3 quarters. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll roll that here. We got a 2. So what that does is every friendly unit and uncontrolled monster in that quarter suffers a +0 shooting attack. So luckily I have no soldiers over there. The dividing line is right here. So we'll start with shooting attacks on the green mana worm. +0 against +1 defense. That is 3 damage on the green one. On the silver one, no damage there. And there's one gorilla over there, and that's a miss on the gorilla. And then another mana worm spawns in corner number 3. So that's probably the one spot I didn't want it to appear because it can reach Skyla on its turn. Normally additional mana worms would appear had I cast spells, but no spells were cast, so we move on to Eirvathon's turn, and he will activate with Bronth the Knight and the Barbarian. And we'll start out with having the Barbarian run over here, and he will engage the mana worm from there. The infantryman cannot add support because he's engaged with 2 mana worms. So the Barbarian will attack with +4 against +1 defense. That is a 17 +2 damage. That is a lot of damage to that 8 armor mana worm. And this one goes down. Next, Bronth will run up. He will attack. He is fight +4, double supported for +8. And that Reaver Sword gives him +2 damage. Against +1. That's at 22. That's a lot of damage. Another mana worm goes down. And then Eirvathon will run over here on a double move. Jadis, being encumbered with this treasure, will double move 4.5. For the enemy phase, starting with gorillas, Eirvathon is now within 16 inches of this gorilla, so he can hear him. He will climb over all of this terrain. That takes his first move, and then his second move will bring him 3 inches this way. The gorilla over here can see Death Striker, so he will move 9 inches this way on a double move. Not close enough to snap into combat with anybody, though. And the last gorilla, way back there, is actually now just within 16 move units of Jadis, so he will move that direction. Climbing over this debris, he can get to right there. For the mana worms, starting with ones that can do something, this one can double move into combat with Skyla. And then this one can come over and engage her and attack with support. Skyla is a +5 against +3. Yeah, Skyla gets a 16 to a 17. She loses that. Since she is beyond 8 inches from any of her teammates, she gets an additional +1 armor because of the Barbarian's Blade, so she only takes 3 damage from that. For the other mana worms, they can see the spellcasters, so we'll start with these two moving 6 on a double move. These two here will climb over that, move through this terrain just fine, and end up over here. And that's all the mana worms. For the soldier phase, we'll start with having Grayson run over here on a single move. And from there, he can shoot at the gorilla. He moved, so the gorilla has a +5 against +3 shoot. 18, so that is a hit. Gorillas have 12 armor, so that is 6 damage, has 8 health left. Next, Darrow will run over there and do the same thing. He attacks with a +2 against +5. So that's 12 against 12, no damage on a shooting attack, and doesn't get past armor anyway. Then Death Striker will run up to engage the gorilla. And Pierre will run up and attack. With a sword +2 and support of Death Striker, he's a +8 against +4. Alright, it got a 22, but I got a 25. That is 13 damage. It had 8 health left, so it goes down. We'll leave it on the board. Defeated. Next, the Master Thief will run down here, and he will get over here onto this quadrant. Over here to Skyla, we'll see what she can do, and she'll attack the green one. The green one's supported with +3 against +5. Skyla gets a 23. That one is defeated. And over here to this side, my infantryman and my men-at-arms will both move. The recruit, the infantryman, he can get to right there. And the men-at-arms can get right here. They're starting to climb over this rubble. And that is all of my soldiers. So now we'll roll to see which quadrant a bunch of rubble falls into. Quadrant number 1. So that's really nice. I have no soldiers in that quadrant. The only quadrant I don't. And there's 2 gorillas and 2 worms in there. So we'll start with this gorilla, then that gorilla. Then we'll go tannish orange and then green. Gorilla number 1, shoot +0 against shoot +5 +4. That is a hit. That is 3 damage on that gorilla. Gorilla number 2. Oh wow, that's a 16. That's 4 damage on that gorilla. The tannish orange mana worm. It defended. It got a 19 against 12, and the green mana worm. 14 against it, but a critical defense, so no damage on the mana worms. And then 1 mana worm spawns in corner number 3 again. So Skyla's going to be fighting a lot of these guys down here. For the turn 3 wizard phase, I will have Eirvathon activate with the man-at-arms and the infantryman. And we'll start out by having Eirvathon double move over this rough terrain here and engage this gorilla. Actually, he will stop within an inch of the gorilla, which will make the gorilla snap into combat. Then the man-at-arms, he has to double move to get to the gorilla because of this rough terrain. He'll come around behind it, still stand more than an inch away from those mana worms. And then the infantryman can reach the white gorilla on a single move, snapping into combat, and he will attack with double support. He's normally a +3 with double support, so +7 against +4. I got a 22 against a 9. That is +2 damage, so that would normally be 12 damage, and that gorilla only had 9 health left, so it is defeated. Now for the apprentice phase, Jadis carrying this treasure can double move 4.5 to right over here. And now it's the monster's turn. There's only one gorilla left, and this one can double move, climb over this, and just barely snap into combat with my man-at-arms. So he will do that. While we're over here, we will now have this orange one here behind the man-at-arms and attack with support. The mana-worm is +3 and my man-at-arms is +3. I got a 13, which deals 5 damage to that worm. I will then push this mana-worm out of combat. We'll just push it this way so that, because it won't stay up here. Then this green one will move in and attack. Same thing with support. It's +3 against +3. Oh no, it got a critical hit. Man-at-arms goes down. Over to these mana-worms. They cannot see anybody on my team, but they always have line of sight to my spellcasters, so they will just double move this way. 6 units to right here. And then over here, this green one will double move into combat with Skyla. Then the beige colored one will attack with support. +3 against +5. Alright, it won. It's a 16 against armor of 13, so 3 damage on Skyla. For my soldier phase, both Bronth and the Barbarian will double move. Bronth has a move of 6 with that Reaver's Blade. They can get over to here, to right there, just past the debris. Over here, we will have Death Striker double move over here to engage the beige mana-worm to help Skyla out a little bit. And then Skyla will go ahead and attack the green mana-worm. It gets no support, so +5 for Skyla, +1 for the mana-worm. She got an 8 against 5. So that does hit. She does +2 damage right now because she has an ally close by. So it does 2 damage to the green one, and she will push it out of combat. Over here, Grayson the Tracker will run up here, climbing this wall, and from there he will shoot at the green mana-worm. Shoot +3. He moved, so defensive +2. 13 to 10, so that deals 5 damage. It's still alive. Then Darrow will do essentially the same thing, firing at the green mana-worm. This will be a +2 versus +2. 19. Alright, he deals a bunch of damage, and that one is defeated. And then Pierre, on a double move, since there's no rough terrain, he can wind through here and snap into combat with the silver one. Next, the Master Thief will run over here, and he will pick up that treasure. Roll to see if a monster appears on a 16+. Nope. For the end of the round, we'll see where the crumbling ruins happen. In quadrant number 3, which is down here. So first we'll have it attack the green mana-worm, +0 against +1 defense. The green one's fine. The beige mana-worm, +1 or +0 shoot, +1 defense. That one also does nothing. Next we'll do Skyla, fight +5 against shoot 0. She defends, and now Death Striker, since he just moved down here, he's a +1 against +0, so he does take 1 damage on that. And Grayson and Darrow are also both in this quadrant, so Grayson will do him first. He's a +2 against +0. He defends that, and Darrow, +2 against +0. He defends that as well. A mana-worm will spawn in corner number 2. We'll put this black one way back here. For turn number 4, Eirvathon will activate with the recruit here, the infantryman, and he will fire an irregular arrow from his bow and arrow that he bought at the green mana worm. He's a shoot +0 against fight +1, and that misses. Since he is within an inch of this white gorilla, he will attempt to move, which will immediately make this gorilla snap into combat. We'll move this dead one out of the way. And now the recruit will activate and move into combat and then attack. With support, he has a fight +5 against fight +4. All right, 23 with +2 damage against armor 12. That is 13 damage, almost enough to take it down. And actually, it had already taken damage from falling debris. It was at 8, so it is defeated as well. We'll just move it over here because more soldiers are going to be coming this way. Move him out of the way too. Jadis will now activate with Bronth and the Barbarian. The Barbarian's just within reach, that 3 movement units, but we'll have Bronth activate first and run up here to attack the green mana worm. He has a fight +4 against fight +1. Failure. 17, he has armor of 13, so that is 4 damage on Bronth. Then the Thug, who is upgraded to a Barbarian, will run up, and he will attack, now with support. Actually, it won't be support because this tan one would be able to snap into combat, and he'll actually attack the tan one. No support is given. He has a fight +4 against fight +1. 14 against 8, that is successful with +2 damage. That is 8 damage on that mana worm. That one is defeated. And Jadis, encumbered by this treasure, now that there's not so much of a threat over there, will actually come this way on a double move. For the enemies, we will start with having this green one. He will attack Bronth because Bronth has the least amount of health, and it is Bronth is supported there. +6 against +1. 23, that is another dead mana worm. Over here, this silver one will attack Pierre with a +1 against my +6. And I got a 19, that one is defeated. We'll have this one in the back corner move before I forget about him. You can double move up to about there. Over here, this green one will move into combat with Skyla and attack. No support is given. It is a +1 against my +5. I got an 8 against 10. It won but does not get past my armor. The beige one will now attack. Death Striker has 7 health left while Skyla only has 6, so it will attack her. No support given again, so I am a +5 against +1. 19 against 12 with +2 damage. That is a dead vapor. Mana worm, not vapor snake. For my soldier phase, we'll start with having Death Striker run over here to engage this mana worm, and he will attack with support. +3 against +1. 22. He defeats that mana worm. Then Skyla will head over here. She can get kind of right into this debris here. I'll just remember she's not dead. The Master Thief carrying this treasure can double move over to here while encumbered. I'll double move both of these guys off here. They'll come over here and get over here on the other side of Pierre. And Pierre, assuming these two ranged soldiers can finish off that mana worm, he will run over here on a double move to right there. End of the round, we'll see which quadrant gets crumbling debris falling. Number 1. Looking over here, Eirvathon is on this side of the line, but all 3 of these soldiers are in the number 1 quadrant, and Pierre is to the side of that line, so he's fine. Alright, we'll go Bronth, Barbarian, Infantryman. Bronth is a +4 against +1, +0 actually. No damage. The Barbarian +4 against +0, 6 against 5, he's fine. And the Recruit at +3 against +0, 7 against 18. He takes 7 points of damage. And a Mana Worm spawns in corner number 1. We'll put a green one back here in this corner. And we'll move on to turn number 5. So I'll start out by having Eirvathon activate by himself. He'll just kind of wind his way through here on a double move and end right there. Jadis will then also double move. With his treasure being encumbered, he will come up here to right there on a double move. Now it's the monster phase. There are a whopping 2 Mana Worms on the board, so we'll start with this one. It will move towards Eirvathon. He's the closest spellcaster. I can double move to right there. And this one over here, seeing these ranged soldiers, will double move to right there. And now we will have these 2 soldiers go. We'll have Grayson fire an arrow at the Mana Worm. He's a +3 against +1. 19, that is 11 damage. So that arrow takes out that Mana Worm. On a single move, he will then wind around through here, over by Pierre. Then Darrow, on a double move, will wind through here, and he can make it over this rubble pile. Then over here, Death Striker will run up, leap over Skyla, and double move to there. Then Skyla will double move, having to climb over some rubble, and end up right in front of Death Striker. Then the encumbered Master Thief will run up here to right there on a double move. Over on this side, the Infantryman, the Recruit, will pick up this treasure token. We'll see if a monster spawns on a 16+. Yes, we've got our first random monster. For encounter level, all right, that's a level 1, and it is a bear. And the way I determine where random monsters show up is I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 around this way instead of having them appear right on the centers of the edges. 4. So we have our bear cat, and a 4 is right there. So that is a very bad spot to have him appear. And then the Recruit will move. Encumbered move will get him right over here by these fallen gorillas. Then the Barbarian will double move through here, right up in front of Eirvathon. Bronth will then double move up on top of this. And from there he'll be the closest figure to this Mana Worm. And lastly, Pierre will climb over all this rubble to right there to draw out this bear cat. We'll see which quadrant the rubble falls on. Quadrant number 2. Well, good thing I moved Pierre out of there, so we're going to hit the bear cat, the ranger, the tracker, and the master thief. We'll start against the bear cat. It's a +4 against a +0 shooting attack. It defends. Next is Darrow the Ranger, +2 against +0. Got a 7 against 6, no damage. Next is Grayson, +2 against +0. That is a defense. And lastly, we have the Master Thief, +3 because he's carrying treasure against +0. Alright, no damage there. The rubble was useless that turn. And a Mana Worm spawns in corner number 4. Alright, so that's down here. That's probably not going to do anything this battle. For round 6, we'll start out by having Eirvathon do a double move over this rubble. And right back there. Then Jadis will do a double move. I didn't plan this out quite right. I wanted to have him do a single move and drop the treasure next to the Barbarian, but I didn't plan that out, so he'll just be right there this turn. Now for the creature phase, we will start by having this Bearcat charge Pierre. And it will attack. Pierre with his magical sword is +6 against +4. Alright, he got a 23. They have 10 armor, so that is 13 damage on that Bearcat right away. And then he will actually push himself out of combat so that these guys can shoot at him later. For the Mana Worms, this one, Jadis is its closest spellcaster, so it'll move over here 4, and then it will be able to move into combat with Bronth from there, so that is what it will do. Over in this corner, this one here will just double move to right there. For my soldier phase, I'll have my encumbered infantryman run up here next to the Mana Worm. He'll be right up here, engaged, and then Bronth will attack with support. Bronth is now +6 against +1, 15 to 11, and his Reaver Blade does +2 damage. That is a dead Mana Worm. Bronth will then hop down from here and come down here next to Jadis. Right there. Then the Barbarian on a double move can just get just past Eirvathon. The Master Thief can double move over to here. And then Grayson, the Tracker, will fire an arrow at the Bearcat. There's one intervening soldier, so that gives it a +1. It is a large creature, so it gets a -2, and it normally has a +4 fight, so altogether that is a +3 for the Bearcat against +3 shoot. Nothing. Grayson will then just run over here to right there, and now Darrow will fire an arrow. No intervening terrain, so he's a +2 against +2 for the large creature. Failure on the arrow. He will then run up and engage the Bearcat. And then Pierre will run up and engage the Bearcat. And Pierre will attack with support for +8 against +4. 16 against 19. So Pierre takes 8 damage. Over to here, Death Striker will double move clear past the Master Thief. And then Skyla will double move 7.5 to right up here. We'll now roll to see where the crumbling ruins fall. Quadrant number 4. The only thing in this quadrant is that Mana Worm, +0 shooting against +1 defense, and no damage there. A Mana Worm spawns in corner number 2. So right back here. That one might get into some of this action, we'll find out. To start turn number 7, I will have Eirvathon activate with the Barbarian, and then Eirvathon is going to cast his first spell of the battle by casting Enchant Weapon on the Barbarian's Blade. He casts this on a 6. Success. Then Eirvathon will run over here by the edge, getting ready to leave, and then the Barbarian, on a single move, can come over here and snap into combat. And he will attack with double support. He's normally a +5, so +9 against +4. I got a 25 against a 23. With that being a double-handed weapon, that is 17 damage. It only had 1 health left. The Bearcat goes down. Next, over to Jadis. He will activate with Bronth, and he will drop the treasure with his first action, and then he will move this way. And that will put him right over here. Bronth will then pick up the treasure and move 3 inches this way. The treasure was already picked up once, so no monsters spawn. For the creature phase, this Mana Worm will wind through here and end up right there. And in the back corner over here, this one will double move right up to here. For my soldier phase, we will have the recruit run over here next to Bronth on a double move. Then over here we will have Grayson the archer, the tracker, come over here and fire an arrow at the mana worm. And he has a clear shot. We'll say 1 intervening terrain. He moved, so +3 against +2. Failure. Darrow will then attempt the same thing. I'll just come all the way up against this so that it doesn't cause intervening terrain. He's now +2 against +1. 20. That is a dead mana worm. And just to be safe, we'll go ahead and have Pierre run off the board. Death Striker can double move off the board. The Master Thief, being encumbered, can just barely get over this rubble with everything he's carrying. Skyla can double move kind of right up behind him there. End of the round, we'll see which quadrant the rubble falls into. Quadrant 3. There is nothing in this quadrant, so nothing happens there. We will spawn 2 mana worms this turn because I did cast a spell. One will show up in corner 4 and one will show up in corner 1. Alright, so one shows up there. One shows up down here. And I'd forgotten that when I cast that last spell, it would make all mana worms on the table move an additional 3 inches. So this one was on the table before, so it will move up to right there. And it would have made a mana worm over there move, but it wouldn't have got into combat, so that wouldn't have really made any difference down there. And now that I've remembered that rule, I actually want to try to draw this one closer to me. So I'll go ahead and have Eirvathon cast Enchant Weapon on his hand weapon. He casts on a 6. Success. So all mana worms immediately move 3 inches toward him. Then I will have him run off the board. And now for Jadis' turn, I will have him fire an enchanted arrow at that mana worm. He casts on an 8 with a -2. That's a 7. He'll empower that for 1. There's a +8 against +1 shooting attack. 11 to 7. That does deal 3 damage to it. That will again cause all the mana worms to move 3 inches. I suppose it would let this thing snap into combat, so it will literally snap right into combat there with Bronth. That's close enough. And this one will move 3 inches this way toward Jadis. I will then have Jadis use his move to skirt past this and run off the board. For the creature phase, we will have this one double move over to here. Now the interesting thing is that these will always have line of sight to spellcasters, but it doesn't say anything about other soldiers, and since this wall's in the way, it actually has no line of sight, so it will move a random direction. And for random direction, it would go this way, and when it runs into a barrier, as per the rules, it will stop its move. From there, it still cannot see any figures, so it will not make a second random move, again per the rules. Over here, the green mana worm will attack Bronth. Bronth is at a +4 against +1. 10 to 19. That is 6 damage on Bronth. Bronth was at 8, so he goes down to 2. For my soldier phase, we will go ahead and have Bronth attack the mana worm. Again, +4 against +1. 21. That is a dead mana worm. And then he will move 3 to right there. My barbarian will now move, and on a single move he can snap into combat with this mana worm. And he will attack. He has a +5 with his enchanted two-handed weapon against +1. It's only an 8 against 4. He wins, but no damage. He will stay in combat. Actually, since that's a two-handed weapon, it deals +2, so 2 damage. The creature's down to 1. Then my infantryman will run over here past Bronth. Over here, the Master Thief will run off the board with this treasure. Skyla will run down here on a double move. And Darrow and Grayson will both run off the board. Crumbling Rubble affects quadrant 4. Just one enemy is in that quadrant. It's +0 shooting against +1 defense. That does deal 2 damage to that mana worm. And now 3 mana worms will spawn. They'll show up in corners 1, 1, and 3. 1 shows up here in 3, and 2 will show up down here in corner number 1. And the mana worms will go first because I have no spellcasters. These will double move up to here. This silver one can just barely see Bronth, so it can move that direction. To right there. This one can't see anybody, so it'll go a random direction, which will make it just come over here. And then lastly, we have this one back here that's engaged with the Barbarian, so it will attack. It's a +1 against my +5. I got a 17. It is defeated. For my turn, my treasure wielders will run towards the edge. They'll end up right there on a double move. And we'll give them their treasure. Then this Barbarian will come over here and attack the brown one, making sure to stay away from the beige one. +5 against +1. 17, that's another dead mana worm. And Skyla is just barely within range to snap into combat, and she will attack. She's also a +5 against +1. 24, +2 damage. It is defeated. End of the round, we'll see which quadrant gets Crumbling Ruins. 1, of course, that's where all my guys are. All right, we'll go Barbarian, Skyla, Recruit, and then Bronth. Barbarian +5 against +0. He takes 1 point of damage. Skyla +5 against +0. 18 against 7, no damage. Next is the Recruit, +3 against +0. No damage. And Bronth at +4 against +0. All right, no damage there. A mana worm spawns in corner number 1, of course. It shows up right there. And we jump right into the creature phase this round. So it will come over here and engage my Barbarian on a double move. This lonely one over here will do a random move this way and end its turn. And now we'll go back over here. We will have the Barbarian attack the mana worm. +5 against +1. Oh no, a critical hit, of course. The Barbarian goes down. Skyla will, actually, we'll have these guys run off. There's no need for her to even fight it. So these guys will run off the board, and Skyla will run off the board. And the battle is over. I think my team did pretty well. 10 members made it off the board with 3 treasures. We did have 2 fallen soldiers. I think it's kind of funny. The only 2 that fell are the ones that I have not given names or titles to yet. So let's find out how these guys do, starting with the Man-at-Arms. He is dead. And the Barbarian, he is fine. Now that we know the status of our warband, I'll roll for these treasures. First one on the Perilous Dark table. 12. 12 is more ground mana worm teeth, which I suppose is fitting considering the scenario I just completed. And I'll roll twice on the standard treasure table. Got an 8 and a 12. 8 is 20 gold crowns and a magic weapon or armor, and a 12 is 60 gold crowns and a magic item. For my magic weapon or armor, 1. One is a hand weapon with fight +1, which is kind of boring considering I can make those, but we'll take it nonetheless. And for the magical item, 16. 16 is a belt of animal repellents. This item makes it hard for animals to come close to the wearer, so we'll see if I end up using it or just selling it. For my out-of-game spells, starting with Embed Enchantment, Eirvathon will try to permanently embed the enchanted weapon spell that is on his hand weapon on a 8. Success. During the battle, I'd cast Enchanted Weapon on the Barbarian, but I'd forgotten that when he took damage from the Mana Worm, that actually canceled any spells active on him. So Jadis can't attempt to embed that, but he can try to cast Enchant Weapon and then embed that. So that is what he will do. Cast Enchant Weapon on a 6 with a -2. 4, that's a 2, so he doesn't do that, so he cannot attempt to embed that. Next, Eirvathon will attempt Write Scroll on a 12. Failure, and Jadis with a -2. Failure also. So, at the start of the battle, Eirvathon brewed a potion of teleportation, and for loot, they gained 80 gold crowns, found ground mana worm teeth, a belt of animal resistance, and both found and created hand weapons +1. For experience points, Eirvathon gained 60 for defeating all 3 gorillas, 60 more for collecting all 3 treasures, 150 for 10 members surviving the battle, and 30 for 3 spells cast for a total of 300 experience points. Eirvathon's warband did pretty great this battle. With these white gorillas, if you've seen some of the older videos on our channel, you'll know there's been a couple times where those things have appeared and have caused some pretty serious damage to the warbands. But this time I handled them pretty well. I think that bear cat that appeared was actually more of a threat than those gorillas ended up being. With the exception of those 2 critical hits that the mana worms landed on a couple of my soldiers, they didn't end up being too much of an issue. My strategy to not cast many spells worked well to limit how many of them appeared and to limit how quickly they can move across the board. But even with that, I think I defeated 15 of them during the battle. I liked the crumbling ruins mechanic for this scenario. I think that it encourages you to kind of split your warband up a little bit to reduce the risk of your entire team getting hit by falling rubble on the same turn. And it actually kind of worked out to my benefit because a lot of the times that rubble was hitting my enemies more than it was hitting my team. And I think that it just adds a nice, subtle bit of tension and decision making to the scenario. Although I would have liked to have found a better magical item when I rolled on the Perilous Dark treasure table, the ground mana worm teeth that I found, I guess, is kind of fitting considering I was fighting mana worms. But I'll probably end up selling that. I came out of this battle with a couple magical weapons, which is nice. And I was surprised I actually maxed out my experience again, getting 300 experience points when I only cast 3 spells successfully for the entire game. For strategy tips, one general strategy for the entire Perilous Dark Expansion is that I would not recommend the Man-at-Arms soldier. And that's not just because mine died in this battle. I have a video linked in the description below where I compare the Man-at-Arms to the Treasure Hunter and the Infantryman. And while the Treasure Hunter is kind of on a whole other level, usually in a head-to-head game, I would recommend a Man-at-Arms probably over an Infantryman. But with the Perilous Dark scenarios playing against artificial intelligence, I think that the Infantryman is quite a bit better than a Man-at-Arms. This is because it's a lot easier in these scenarios to plan how you can team up on an enemy, where when you're playing against a thinking opponent, if they see you sending 4 of your soldiers at one of their guys, they're going to adjust their strategy. And I think that in Perilous Dark, offense is more important than defense. And having that +2 bonus damage from the Infantryman's 2-handed weapon, I think is better than the extra armor and health that the Man-at-Arms brings to the table. And actually, the lower health of the Infantryman can actually be helpful because their health is lower than a lot of the elite soldiers, the treasure hunters, the knights, the templars, and so the enemy will actually want to attack them, which can both protect your more expensive units and also give you a unit that's got the bonus attack that's fighting off any enemies that might be coming at your soldiers. And that's because the creature actions dictated by the Perilous Dark rules make it so that monsters will always attack the lowest health point member of your warband if they're in a multiple combat. And I kind of knew some of this going into this scenario, and I mostly chose that man-at-arms just to give a little more variety to my warband. For strategies specific to this scenario, I would highly recommend limiting how many spells you cast. That really helps to limit how many mana worms spawn and how quickly they can get around, and that seemed to work pretty well for me. Also, before the battle, I increased my spellcaster's fight and health. I don't think either of them ended up in combat during the battle, but that could be helpful because if they're not casting spells, they might be fighting more. Having them carry treasure, which I had my apprentice do, is also another good plan because especially the apprentice isn't very good in combat. I gave them both bows before the battle started so that they could fire some ranged shots without having to get into combat. Something I didn't really explore in my playthrough is you could actually use your spells to manipulate where the mana worms will go on the board. Especially if you have something like a teleport spell, you could have your wizard over in the corner and have them cast a few spells to draw all the mana worms into that corner and then teleport to the other side of the board, leaving them all just trapped over there while your warband sneaks through the middle or the other side of the table. So let me know in the comments below what you thought about my playthrough and what your experiences have been with this scenario, maybe other strategies you'd recommend, and be sure to check out the next battle video, which will be the hunting ground. We want to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to add a like or a comment below, or subscribe so you can keep up with all the content we're releasing. And with that, I'm Alan with Dad's Playing Games, and we'll see you on the next video.